This video is brought to you by the metric system. It's better. It feels like nowadays, every Marvel comic book property is getting itself a movie, or a TV show, or a video game, or a comic, or a movie, or a book, or a comic book, or a Pez dispenser, or a shoe, or a bubble bath, or a comic. It's almost as if nothing has ever been cancelled and everything just moves forward with very little regard to whether or not it's actually any good. However, this is very much not the case. In the history of Marvel, even recent history, a bunch of projects that have had great potential and sometimes very little potential have been abandoned, banished to the depths of Marvel's basement, along with Asbestos Lady and Dr. Bong. Never forget. So let's do 5 or 8 cancelled projects. I don't know, whatever it takes to get this video over 10 minutes. Does that make you happy, YouTube algorithm? I feel like we haven't had a solid Marvel game in a very long time. I mean, we're getting Spider-Man later this year, thank God, but it's been slim pickings, unless you like mobile games, I don't, or Lego games, which I am indifferent to. Sega had the rights for a while, some people say Sega, in Australia we say Sega, it's just the way it is, and they just made a bunch of crap, but also Captain America Super Soldier, which is kind of good. We had a look at it the last episode of Caravan of Garbage. It's on the channel, you can check it out if you want. But anyways, after that, things just kind of went silent. Then in 2012, THQ were to release a first-person Avengers game to coincide with the film. It focused on a Skrull invasion and included the characters of Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America and Thor, plus it had a split-screen co-op component where you can play along with your friends. You'd also be pitted against the Skrulls, and a bunch of them had absorbed the powers of some other Marvel characters, such as Wolverine and Cyclops, resulting in this Wolverine-Cyclops combo. Things were actually looking really good for this game, and the early build, it was coming along. But THQ's parent company made some bad decisions involving the release of some not very good games, and also the lieu tablet for consoles, which until I began researching this, I had never heard of, and can immediately see why nobody in their right minds would want this. So they were looking to cut costs due to these failings. So instead of investing their resources into building a time machine and going back to cut the throat of the person who greenlit the lieu, they went, oh hey, the Australian dollar is quite high at the moment. This game is costing us money that we don't want to spend. Let's cancel it. Now I'd hazard a guess that this game would have sold extraordinarily well, even if it was terrible, considering the Avengers movie, by the end of 2012, was the 3rd highest grossing film of all time. But that's easy to say many years later. I mean, it's so easy to say, because we're in the future. It's pretty good. Before the Inhumans were brought to the very big screen and then the very small screen and then cancelled, they were originally just going to be brought to the big screen. If you cast your mind back to 2014, a year filled with Flappy Bird. Anyways, a big screen adaptation of The Inhumans was officially moving forward after being in development since 2011. The rumor was, and bear in mind, this is a rumor, that Ike Perlmutter, former Marvel CEO, had a disdain for Fox-owned Marvel properties such as the X-Men and Fantastic Four, and at the very least, played a very small part in ramping down these characters across all the media areas which Marvel has actual control of. His answer to the X-Men was to be the Inhumans, a group of superpowered mutants, individuals, that put on costumes and work as a team to take down whoever the villain of the Inhumans is. Rumor has it that Kevin Feige sidestepped Perlmutter because of his tight grip that he had on the Marvel brand, which meant he was stopping things like female-led solo films, and apparently he was okay with recasting Rhodey because these two look the same. But anyway, Kevin Feige went straight to Disney CEO Bob Iger in the hope that Perlmutter would be removed from his position of power. He was, and instead of getting an Inhumans movie with Vin Diesel potentially in the lead, that's the story, we got the IMAX release of the first couple of episodes of the season, then the rest of the 8 episodes were aired on ABC television to a resounding, this is terrible. And it was! And now it's probably gone forever, as seems to be any chance of the original slated movie. If you are wondering what became of Ike Perlmutter, well, he's extremely rich, so, he's doing that, and he still has a hand in Marvel television. He's also notoriously private, and very few images of him actually existed until recently. And then we got things like this surfacing. Now, I know that this looks incredibly threatening and ominous, but that could just be the lighting and the suspicious manner in which they're both standing and looking. I bet with a little bit of music, this could be a whole lot of something else. Deadpool is a hot property at the moment, with 2 mesmerizing appearances, mesmerizing for 2 very different reasons, and another on the way. It's never been a more relevant time for a man in a red leather costume to unironically stare into the camera and tell an audience to look at his balls. Which is why Fox went ahead and greenlit a Donald and Stephen Glover penned animated series, which was to debut in 2018 with an initial 10-episode run. And it seemed like a match made in heaven. I feel like I need a clever spin on that match made in heaven expression, because, we're talking about Deadpool. He's all about quips and making a fun gag. How about this? It seemed like a match made in heaven, and also, look at my balls. Now, it wasn't clear as to whom was going to voice the title character. It was thought by some that Donald Glover would, but in some test animation that was leaked online, the vocals are that of Ryan Reynolds. They ripped some dialogue from his movie to help sell this scene. Despite being unfinished, it actually looks pretty great. And perhaps like the first Deadpool movie, this leak will ultimately lead it to being revived. But for now, we can only dream of an animated Deadpool, telling an audience to look at his balls. Plus, it was also revealed by Stephen Glover in a now deleted tweet that the show was pretty dark, kind of like Rick and Morty dark, and an episode about Taylor Swift was the straw that broke the camel's back as he was showing the audience his balls. Make of all this what you will, or never think about it again. Either is fine. Moving on. I'd like to talk about Daredevil. Now, the character is enjoying some success as an ongoing Netflix series. First season was great. Second season was great in parts. The Defenders was fine. But just before the character made its way back to Marvel, there was a last-ditch effort by Fox to keep the character as they were moving forward with a 1970s Serpico-inspired Daredevil film based on various Daredevil runs from the 70s and 80s. This was to be from the director of Wolf Fight. That director was Joe Carnahan, and he was aiming for a hard R reboot of the character and even created a little sizzle reel to get the studio on board, which they very much were. Unfortunately for him, the rights to Daredevil were to return to Marvel if they didn't get the film going. And in an effort to appease Marvel and give them more time to work on it, they offered up both Galactus and the Silver Surfer to grease the wheels of Marvel and its big budget Hollywood movie making. But Marvel and its big budget Hollywood filmmaking was like, fuck off. It kind of worked out well for Marvel because now they have Daredevil, and with this new Fox buyout, they're going to have every other character that Fox had. But to be honest, the idea of a 1970s Daredevil film, it sounds kind of awesome. But hey, there you go. I want to keep talking about Daredevil, if that's okay. If this upsets you, how about this? Every time I say Daredevil, just imagine I say the words Granny Smith apple, which in my opinion is the metric system of apples, as in it's the best one. In the early 2000s, Marvel games were having a pretty solid run, encompassing Spider-Man and the X-Men and the Punisher, which was why I was pretty jazzed when it was announced that an open-world Daredevil game was in the works. Implementing swinging mechanics as well as rail grinding and, what would you call this? Blind man vision. It was to include a number of Marvel characters, such as an extended Punisher cameo, Black Widow, and Elektra, whilst the story follows Granny Smith Apple as he tries to keep the city together after the Kingpin is murdered. Turns out he wasn't dead. It was all a scheme to get his enemies to beat each other up. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert for this dead game. This dead game, though, was extremely close to being finished. But unfortunately, Marvel weren't happy with it, as it wasn't in keeping with what they thought was true to the character, including the rail grinding. You see, a lot of the decisions, they were coming down from Sony, who also had a hand in the product. In the end, the game was shelved, and also apparently a bunch of people working on it had a crippling drug problem that affected their work. So the moral of the story is, don't take drugs, because it means that I can't play the Daredevil game I wanted to play in 2003. God damn it! The release of Murder in, or on, or at the Orient Express was a historic event for Fox Studios, because that date was initially slated for the release of Fantastic Four 2. The follow-up to the... Look, to put it lightly, it was a complete and utter cinematic disaster that's so awful, it's almost unparalleled for a film of its nature. And it wasn't just the fact that nobody flocked to see it. I mean, I did, and some of you probably did, because, we're idiots, I guess. But it was also plagued by reshoots, on-set dramas, including a scuffle between the film's star and its director, and apparently a bunch of dogs destroyed a house, I'm fairly certain. I am not making any of this up. You can Google it. Also, I made a video on it. I'll link it below if you want to see it. Anyways, the sequel itself isn't of interest to me, because what I'm curious about is the alleged script that was written for a Fantastic Four X-Men crossover film. Pretty much as soon as this film was released, producer Simon Kinberg made it clear that no, these two sets of characters do not exist in the same universe. That, though, may have been the intent all along. Besides, if the movie turned out great, which it very much did not, Fantastic Four 2015, if you recall, which you probably don't, involved interdimensional travel, so they could have just stepped over into the X-Men universe. So yeah, it's a shame that the Fantastic Four wasn't better, so this could happen, but at the same time, if it was, Michael B. Jordan probably wouldn't have been Killmonger in Black Panther, and Miles Teller wouldn't have been... But hey, out of all of these, which would you have liked to have seen the most? Or which would you have liked to have seen the least? Say whatever you want. Leave a comment if you care to. Alright, this is the end, but don't be sad. There's videos here every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So subscribe for that, or do the bell icon or something. Also, I have a podcast called The Weekly Planet, where we always talk movies and comics and TV shows. That's out every Monday. All of that, though, is compiled at planetbroadcasting.com, which is a great site with some really great content creators. But thanks for watching this. I appreciate it. Take care.